Y'all on level 1, I'm level 3. Pounding on the table for my team. Every night I flex. I'm making big moves. That's a big move. Big money, big moves.
Do a brief intro and then we'll jump right into it. But thank you for joining, Chris, and thanks everyone for taking time out. I know it's a tough time slot, but Chris is based in Europe, so we have to be cognizant of multiple time zones for our listeners and speakers. So hopefully, if you couldn't join, we'll definitely try to get a recording out. I'll assign that to Avi. Hopefully he does it. He's been on top of it lately. But yeah, just to kind of kick things off, we're going to be talking all things Cloudflare. I have a lot of tweets pinned up here from, like, right now you can see a Cloudflare thread that I had written. These are some tweets from May that you're going to see from, some of the posts that Chris had written very early. That's when I started my position in April and May I was buying. And, you'll just find all the articles that Chris has written about Cloudflare. There's also this thread that you can see right now, which talks about, like, why him and I kind of are working on holding the stock. But you can easily argue, make a case for selling at the price it's at right now, and we'll certainly get into that through the conversation. So feel free to go through the pinned tweets as well. Includes Chris's articles, threads on Cloudflare, all the way from May till now. Without further ado, Chris, if you can just quickly introduce yourself. I guess I'll just throw the first question at you and kind of go right into it. On how did you even find Net and what intrigued you? Because I know I saw a partner with NVIDIA in April, so curious because you run the multi-baggers subscription, so it's always interesting to hear how you a ticker and what kind of keeps you going with it. I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I missed certain parts of your question because you fell away. I'm not sure if that was my connection or yours. But I understood that the question was how I find Cloudflare. Well,
how you, and also just a quick introduction of yourself and like your service.
Oh yeah. Well, let's start there then. So I'm Chris. I live in Belgium. You already said that. I live in Europe. It's in Belgium, and I started writing Seeking Alpha in 2016. I started my series. It was a free series called Potential Multi-Baggers in 2017. So May 2nd. Of 2017, that was my first stock pick, Shopify at 77.86, I think. So that was quite a good pick. It's about a 20 bagger. And my aim with potential multi-baggers is to find stocks that have the potential to go up 10 times and more over the next 10 years. So 10 times, that means about 26% on average. That may sound low, but bear markets can have serious consequences. At this moment, I have a compound annual growth rate with my potential multi-baggers, which is about 57% per year since 2017. So I clearly beat that, but it's about the long term. So there are not that many people focused on high growth for the long term. A lot of people say that they're long-term investors until the stock goes down 30% or so, and that's also what I really try to help people with. So I started my marketplace called Potential Multi-Baggers there. And I started doing this full-time last year. So what I really do try to do there is help people with their with the FUD, as they call it, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I think there's a lot of noise, or I don't think so. I'm really sure there's a lot of noise in the market, and people cannot really always put that in the right context because they lack the knowledge sometimes, and then they go by the knowledge that they have, and that knowledge is often price, and that's often the only data point that they have, and if a stock goes down by 30%, they automatically think that something must be wrong here. But that's definitely not always the case. Sometimes it is, but more often than not, it's not. So if you I always I at this moment I would probably would have to ask a percentage of Chris Mayer, because I have plugged his book so many times. But 100 Beggars, it's called. It's a great book, and it's some sort of follow up to a book called 100 to 1 in the stock market by Phelps. Forgot his first name. And it looks at stocks that have gone up 100 times and more. And Chris Mayer starts in 1972 up to 2012, 2014, something like that. And he looks at 365 stocks that go up 100 times and more in that period. So I think the fastest was like 5 or 6 years or so. Some needed the full 30 years or so. But they have one thing in common, and that is that they all have had periods in which they were down 50% from their previous high. And most of them, the majority of them, was down a lot more than 50%. And a huge majority, just one or two exceptions, I think, was down multiple times 50% and more. So what that learns, if you really want to have outsized gainers, you really should be able to ride the volatility. So I think we will come back to that when we talk about the valuation of Cloudflare, because you cannot talk about Cloudflare at this moment without going into the valuation. But to answer your second question, how did I find Cloudflare and what intrigued me? It's I have a list of about 800 stocks that I follow, and my subscribers get a part of that watch list, because I only list for my subscribers what I have already checked a bit more. So that's about 300 stocks, I think, 250, something like that. So outside of the picks, it's a watch list. So several watch lists actually. And Cloudflare was on that elaborate list, and a certain moment, I had already looked at it, and I didn't really understand what they did the first time. I'm not a techie, and so that's why I put it on my personal watch list, but I didn't understand, so I could not explain to other people what they did, or what they did was sustainable, etc., etc., etc. And then at a certain moment, I started following Matthew Prince so this is the founder and CEO of Cloudflare on Twitter, and that led me to Cloudflare's blog, which is very good, by the way. If you're an investor in cloud, you really should subscribe to the blog posts there. They are often about very complicated tech stuff, but the way in which they write it, makes it clear for the in layman's terms what's it all about, what it is all about, and that's where I got my my opening to go into Cloudflare. And then the more I saw, the more I was really impressed by what they're doing, and the really long-term vision. And one of the things that I saw early on is their mission statement. And one of the things I always do when I go a bit deeper into a company is look at the S1, even if it's several years ago that they went public. It still says quite a lot about the the origin of the company. So, and I saw there that their mission statement is to make the internet better, and that's a clear mission statement, and also quite a task, right? And if you see those kind of mission statements, which can be easily ridiculed, it's easy to to laugh with those mission statements, and I know a lot of people laugh with mission statements, and with good reasons, because a lot of companies really don't live up to their mission statement. So, but I saw that it was a constant, in everything that Cloudflare did. They pointed at their mission statement. We do this to make the internet better, and it was not just talk. They walked the talk, and that was another thing that pushed me further on the road of digging and digging and digging, and then I saw everything that I wanted to see, and eventually I picked it at 39. That was quite a long answer,
Yeah,
right?
no, for sure. The mission statement's so simple, and I love it. Right, to build a better internet. So you can't talk about Cloudflare without bringing up the mission. And I like the point that you shared about subscribing to their page of updates that they have, because that's a great way to follow a company, and they do a really good job of sharing updates. I think that's a great tip there, Chris. Going into that, so I think we kind of covered how you found it and what you liked about the stock initially, but we can't really talk Cloudflare without understanding what a CDN is, right? So can you just give like I know you've done it in your alpha articles really well and and a little bit more in depth, but can you give a brief like kind of overview what a CDN is and why it's even important?
Yeah, well, the CDN is a content delivery network, and one of the what does it do? It makes the internet faster. So that's the main function. So the big gorilla in the space is Akamai. Fastly is also CDN. Amazon has its own CDN, etc. So content delivery network. If you consume content on the internet, that has to go several times to put it simply, from your computer to the server, right? Where the content is. That can be across the ocean several times, because you have to have several quite a lot of. I'm trying to explain this non-visually, because visually it's easier, but you have to go back and forth dozens of times, right? Just to have some simple content delivered to your computer. If that is physically closer to where you live, that goes faster. It's as simple as that. So what does a CDN do? It has data center near bigger cities, where a lot of the content is served faster. So with a it's in cache there, and you don't have to cross the ocean several times each time. So that's basically what a content delivery network is. And why is that important? Because one of the things that Cloudflare did from the start, and that's because of their tech co-founder. The name escapes me right now. Sorry?
Matthew Prince, right? Talking about?
No.
The other guy.
Lee.
Yeah.
So the tech guy, he was really the genius behind the infrastructure of Cloudflare. So, by the way, Matthew Prince had been had been a speaker in a college that Lee attended, and they started talking. That's how they met. but Lee had to leave the company because he has some form of early dementia. It's really tragic story. Um, but he's a one of the great tech innovators in the last decades, because of what he did, especially with the infrastructure. And there are only two companies actually which have that infrastructure completely, and that is Fastly and Cloudflare. And what I mean is so Cloudflare has about 250 data centers around the world, and that's already important to know that if something cannot leave you know the country, for example, we have seen that with Zoom. Zoom, you know, had in the beginning of the pandemic, some of their data went to China or Chinese data centers. It was just 2% or so, or even less, but that was quite a scandal. And you will see that more and more and more, because data is powering. A lot of countries don't want those data to go to other countries. With a CDN, that's perfectly possible, right? So that's already important. But the most important thing is that CDN in and of itself is actually a network, which can be, seen as some form of mini version of the internet itself. And that's very important. And that's also why, the ticker of Cloudflare is net. It's a network. And in that network, Cloudflare can add, functions. It can add services. It can add, everything it wants. Well, it's not that simple, but there's a ton of possibilities there that they can add on that content delivery network. And if you look at it right now, almost 20% of all the internet traffic goes through Cloudflare's reverse proxy. So reverse proxy is something which is between let's say a website. If you have a website, someone might attack it, right? And if you don't want that, you can put up some sort of shield, some sort of, and Cloudflare is that shield. So they are in front of you. They take your traffic and then send it to everyone. And if someone wants to, shut down your website with a hack, they would actually have to take out all of Cloudflare's network, which won't happen, right? So that's the DDoS attacks. Massive attacks actually of requests, which are quite common. And Cloudflare has some has some really impressive numbers there of DDoS attacks that they could mitigate. And that's already a function that is added. But that's the great thing. Cloudflare can actually add service after service after service on that network, and that is really what is going on right now.
Raul, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Nice to chat with you again, man. I don't know if we had talked over Zoom a few months back, but had a quick question. Is there any possibility, or maybe they're already doing this, but anything with like automotive, as more internet comes into automotives? You saw with like BlackBerry, they're kind of getting into some of that security. Do they have an arm that's getting into that, or is that something you see them getting into down the road?
Well, it's not, well, automotive in and of itself, no, because that will be inside of the car.
Yeah.
But what will be very important will be the communication between the cars. If you have an automotive car, you do, and it suddenly has to stop, right? The car behind that car should know that, and their Cloudflare can be really of help because they have almost no latency. So in that part, the communications part, they'll probably be very important. Not the driving in and of itself, probably.
Right. Yeah, I meant more from like the security standpoint. So as Internet of Things comes into cars, like the operating system. So I don't know if you saw like with BlackBerry and AWS where they're partnering and going to start going into all those cars. That was more of the question around the security component if they're going to move into that space at all.
Well, it's still unclear because automotive cars or autonomous cars are not a reality yet. I think a company like CrowdStrike could perfectly go in there because they're endpoint protectors. If there are if you talk about BlackBerry and AWS, you probably have heard that Cloudflare is going into the cloud itself as a cloud player as the fourth public cloud. So maybe they could go there, and the rate of innovation Cloudflare is so fast that it's almost impossible to keep up with all the innovations. Last year they had 450 updates and new products, and this year they'll definitely have more than 500. So they're going really fast. That's a fact. So yeah, at this moment they're not there yet, but maybe tomorrow or in the next week or next month or I think Cloudflare is very smart in looking at what is needed right now and then implementing that incredibly fast. And they are you have companies which have more like a PR functionalities. And I have to think now of a company which I love as well, DocuSign, which has blockchain contracts since 2016 already. And they say, almost nobody asks for it, but the people that ask for it is because they want to come. They want to be published in the local paper. Look, we have our first blockchain contract, and I think that that's nothing for Cloudflare. They won't go into it unless they know there's a market there, and then they implement it very fast. So that's their way of working. That's also how they do that. So they are real innovators.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Actually, that was one of the questions I wanted to kind of get into. It seems like this is a perfect transition for that because they just had their birthday week and they consistently announce new products and innovations to their own tech stack and services they're offering. We've heard, that they're going to get into some competition with Twilio, and also they're talking about this whole fourth cloud component and, offering a lot of different services that can continue to expand their TAM. So I just wanted to ask you, what new products of theirs excite you the most, and why those products per se?
Well, I think if you look at the stock price of Cloudflare, it has shot up since last month. I know very well when their birthday week is. It's the last week of September. The reason I don't forget is that they have the same birthday week as I have. So my birthday is on the 29th of September and theirs is on the 27th. If you look at the stock price since then, it has shot up. I don't know exactly, but something like 60% or so in a month. And the reason is, I think, is their R2 storage solution that they announced, and that is that for cloud. So that's the name the name is funny as well, R2, because that is less than S3. So S minus one and 3 minus 1. S3 is Amazon Web Services simple storage service, and that's actually an object storage service that stores data as objects, and objects are actually files and their metadata, and they do that in buckets, so containers for those objects, for those files with the metadata. And AWS charges each time that data is used. That's the most simple way to name it. And for Cloudflare, that will be, there R2 will be free up to a certain limit. So this could save companies a huge amount of money. And the reason that Cloudflare is able to do that is because costs of the cloud have come down, a lot, not just a bit, but a lot. And AWS has never, we all know how profitable AWS is, and what a giant it is. And if it would split off, it would probably be worth $1 trillion of itself. And the reason, one of the big reasons is that they have never those costs lowered, and they have never given even a part of that to their customers because they didn't have to. Microsoft and Google more or less do the same. So they have the cloud with those three companies. So now what Cloudflare is doing is actually using Jeff Bezos' principle against Amazon. So your profit margin is my opportunity. That's what Jeff Bezos is known for. Well, this is what Cloudflare, is or has announced to be doing. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of companies will be very interested because it can save them a ton of money. If you look at the costs, and for one single piece of data, it's not that much, right? But it's very low. But if you see the how much data are needed, and the transport there, it could save quite a bit of money or quite a lot of money for bigger companies. And I think that is the most exciting announcement that they did. They did several others as well. So they, as you told, they would go into CPaaS, so communication platform as a service. So with they would also go into live streaming. So taking a shot there too. They have their own Cloudflare TV, which broadcasts 24/7. You can find it now on the internet, and quite a few interesting interviews and etc. there as well. So sometimes the CEO is interviewed, or Michelle Zetlin, so the CEO and president of Cloudflare, also co-founder. Quite a lot of other products as well, but I think if you look at it, R2 is the big one.
Yeah, for sure. R2 is certainly probably one of the most exciting pieces of what they've announced. So I'm keen to hear more on that. Avi, did you have another question, or should I keep going? Yes, Avi's on mute, but that's fine. So yeah, the next question, I mean, we can't leave without asking this, right? The valuation is absolutely insane. And I'm sure everyone wants to hear your take on it. Before you get into that, my pinned tweet is a quote of Chris's thread on why we believe we're holding the stock. again, this is by no means advice. This is just our personal opinion. I mean, if someone wants to take profits, you definitely do that. But I think you and I are pretty aligned in wanting to try to hold the best companies for the longest time possible. But even with that mindset, it's so tough, right? Just looking at the way it's run up, and we've been holding for quite some time, and it's also like, there's always the market concern on what can happen in terms of just market dynamics and like stock multiples. I mean, you had FOMC today, which wasn't as hawkish as people potentially fear. We kind of expected what was being said, but still, how do you justify this? And what's your take on? I know you wrote a thread, so if people want to read that thread, it's pinned right here. But we'd love to hear your kind of opinion out loud as well.
Well, I have learned, through the years that if I see a company run up to completely crazy valuations, and let there be no doubt, Cloudflare is there. And I look at the company itself, and I see no weakness, no single one. The strange thing is that stock often continues to go up. We have seen that, we've seen that with Tesla. You have seen that in the past with Amazon. Of course, all time periods are different, and Amazon has never, had the gross margins or that Cloudflare has, so their valuation was lower, but still it was seen as completely crazy. I think that is very important to know. I wrote an article, I don't even remember when it was exactly, but it was earlier this year, and Cloudflare was at 104, and the article was titled "Why Cloudflare Deserves Its Premium Valuation." And I got a lot of comments. It was a free article, so I'm seeking alpha, and got a lot of comments. Oh, this is crazy! It will crash 75%, etc., etc., etc. Well, it hasn't, right? So I have, if I look back on my investing life, the biggest mistakes that I have made dollar-wise were always selling too early. I trimmed my 83 average price position in Shopify at 750. I trimmed 2/3 of my position. That has cost me much more than all my losing stock picks together. So it always sounds so smart to do, right?
It sounds like the right thing, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like the right thing, but it's so hard to do, to time the market and to buy low and sell high. But what is low and what is high, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people thought at 104, this is crazy high, let's sell it. Well, I don't think that and you'll see if the stock crashes, then I mean, now the earnings come up, and maybe it's always possible that the results disappoint, or maybe the results are great, but the stock still drops 30%, as we have seen before in in the trade desk, and in Twilio last week, 70% down. Great earnings. That's always possible. And then people come out, oh, I told you so. Well, whatever, you've been telling me since 70, right? I don't care. And I actually would be happy if it would go down by 40% or so. I would just add. So Cloudflare is one of my biggest positions, but I would, I think everything that I see from the company, and I have an overview of the week each week for my subscribers, and almost every week there's an item or two items or three or four items about Cloudflare doing great things behind the scenes, and really working on the foundations there, and it sets them up. And Cloudflare, because of the business structure, will never grow at 250% revenue. right? So that won't be the case, but I think they can keep up that 50-ish% for a decade or more if they continue like this. And you see that, Cloudflare is a typical innovator. I've already said that, but also from the classical in the classical sense, the term disruptive innovator was coined by Clayton Christensen. So in his books, the innovator's dilemma, and what was the other one? The innovator's, what was it? Choice? I'm not sure anymore, but something like that. And what you see there is that the innovators initially are seen as, the small guys, low quality, often looked as at the, something like a toy. This is just a toy, or it's low quality, or it's for SMBs only, for the smallest companies, etc., etc. And you have seen that with Cloudflare as well. It was seen as, the if I have a website, well, I can use Cloudflare for free as a reverse proxy. Woohoo! And you see a lot of people not understanding that business model and saying, well, that's sort of little guy with his own website, right? And if you look at what they're doing now, they're really expanding into big businesses, big companies, and the the additions of big companies keeps increasing quarter after quarter. So it's one of the metrics that I follow closely when I look at the earnings. Traditionally, Fastly is seen as the one that appeals to big companies, and Cloudflare to smaller companies. But if you look at the reality, $100,000 and more customers, Cloudflare already has more than Fastly. So and that's something that only happened over the last year or so. So I think people underestimate at this moment. It's it's a rocket waiting to be launched, and I'm not talking about the stock price, because the stock price can do very unexpected things. I mean, if you would have said at 100, Cloudflare is going to 190, yeah, right. Or in just a few months, or 60% up in a month, yeah, right. And it can go down 30% of the earnings. We don't know, right? But maybe if the earnings are, a blowout quarter, it could go up, or we'll see. We'll have to see. The valuation is very high. The optionality is very high as well, and often have seen that the market rewards that, and is often smarter than we as individual, more or less rational investors. And it's one of the things that I really had to learn. I sold Square at 24 for what I thought was great 50% gain, right? And I thought it was too expensive. Now, luckily, I bought back, and made a potential multiplier at 75, and it dropped all the way in March to 2020. It dropped all the way to, I think, 32, and I pounded the table for Square to my subscribers, and I kept adding myself, and I could bring down my cost basis to 57 at the time. In my own portfolio then, and price doesn't say what the underlying business does. And if there's another highly discussed stock, Pinterest. if you look at the stock price, it's it's a bad stock. If I look at what's going on under the surface, this company is really changing, and this company will be huge in e-commerce. It's still valued as a social media platform, which it will not be anymore in 2 years or so, or next year, or we don't know. But um, it always takes time to implement the changes, and that's often not seen by the market. They want it now. And if you look at the fundamentals and you are patient, patience is really a competitive advantage. And if you look at it now, you could say, "Oh, I will sell before the earnings." Oh, damn, they had great earnings. Oh, and they shoot up and they go to whatever 250. Okay, when are you going to buy that? Are you going to say, "Oh, I want it under the price that I sold"? So, you know, let's say 190. Okay, so you want it how much under that price? Are you just going for 10% under, or do you want 25% lower? Or and it's so hard. It's so hard, and people don't seem to get that, and they only think about, oh, it's so expensive, so I'm going to sell. But you know I want to have the best companies of our time in my portfolio, and if I want them in my portfolio, I really should hold them, because I wouldn't have expected when I wrote that article, when the stock price was 104. I wouldn't have expected that Cloudflare would have been here, because I already thought it was expensive then, which it was. Um, so they say that the market can be irrational for a longer time than you can be solvent, but it's also the other way around. It can be um, irrational for a long time, and you can just let your stock run. And if it goes down by 30%, yeah, whatever. I mean, that's great. I still have a low cost basis, and I will add with pleasure then. So
Yeah, for sure. I think, like, I don't know if Brian for all the token this term, or if he found it somewhere else, but talking about time in the market over timing the market. I love that, just because I want to be invested, like you said, in the best companies for the longest period of time without making too many in and out moves. So that's definitely well said. And I know you touched on Clayton Christensen. I know we're kind of running out of time a little bit, so I don't want to dive into that too much, but I do want to share with people that he was a professor of Matthew Prince's, who's the founder of Cloudflare, and Chris has written about him in one of his articles. That's how I learned about it. And he's token the father of kind of the term or terminology of disruptive innovation. And this is someone that Matthew Prince has learned from directly at Harvard. And this is, he's written a book, and he's a very kind of famous professor and kind of philosopher, or whatever you want to call him. So this whole concept of disruptive innovation is something very close and dear to Matthew Prince's kind of mindset and his innovation kind of style, I'd say. So it's something definitely to kind of look into, or at least be aware of. I do know we have a question. I think Dave Millhouse, did you have a question?
can I first say something about Christensen? So
Go ahead.
Jeff Bezos, in his typical style, he forced every new employee from a certain level on to read Christensen's books. So really big influence. Steve Jobs devoured them. So Christensen has had a huge influence on Silicon Valley in general. And he was, as you say, and I've written that in one of my articles. He was the professor of Matthew Prince, and Matthew Prince also got a handwritten note from Christensen when he had founded Cloudflare. Just saying, "I'm following you closely. You're doing great work. If I can help, just let me know." So, and he's still very proud of that note.
Yeah,
Dave,
no,
I
I think he tweeted it as well. Go ahead, Avi.
was just going to ask Dave if he's still there. I don't know if he's got a question.
I just added him, so you can definitely ask.
There it goes. You got to hit the mic button, Dave.
Bottom left, you gotta unmute yourself.
Got it.
There
You
we
guys
go.
hear me? Hey guys. Hey. So we're talking Fastly and Cloudflare as basically the only two options in this type of a sector. If we look at it through a narrow lens, or narrow for me over the last year, I mean, Cloudflare has been bonkers and Fastly's been terrible. Are investors, is the entire market looking at this through too narrow of a lens? And then like a second part to that question is, I believe I heard you say you think revenues can grow at 50% a year for a decade, but I might have misheard that. If that is what you said, that would be like $30 billion in revenue in 10 years. I'm very curious as to what you would think Fastly's revenue would, multiply to in 10 years as well.
Well, remind me of your questions when I forget one, right? So let's start with Fastly and Cloudflare. So if you look at the innovations going on, again, that's a key word there, moving fast. And Cloudflare has really learned that from Christensen, like that book title, right? I forgot who wrote it, but ready, fire, aim, right? So first fire and then aim. And that's what Cloudflare does. It releases products at an incredible speed, and then it gives them away for free. And people can give feedback, and they're happy to give feedback because it's a free product and it helps them with their business. And then Cloudflare makes it better and makes it monetizable. So that's something that Cloudflare does. So and that you don't see that in Fastly. They have been tinkering with compute at edge at an incredible slow speed, and they have released it now, but they should have released it over a year ago. And that's really a pity. So they're really top down, while Cloudflare is the other way around. And so if you look at revenue growth as well, Cloudflare, is do I think it's possible 50% for a decade? Yes, if they continue what they're doing, I think that is possible. Of course, it's always very hard uh, to predict the future, but they have that potential, which I don't see in Fastly. So also because Fastly is much more, it's much more usage based, less subscription, based, and it's harder for them because they're much more dependent on how much data flow through their network. If one big client leaves, like we have seen with TikTok, and TikTok was that there was political pressure, etc. So that of course, you can forgive them easily. But if you look at Amazon, for example, leaving and then coming back and then leaving and whatever, that's not a good sign, right? You want companies to be tied into the system, and that's what Cloudflare does much better. It's not just a CDN. It's so much more. If you move from Cloudflare, you will have to stitch together several other solutions from other companies, which is not the case for Fastly. You just need a new CDN. You go to Akamai and you say, well, we want to switch. They switch, and that's it. Or Amazon can take it in house. So they're actually quite different, and that difference has grown. And I had, I had picked Fastly as well, and then I saw the problems that that I am discussing right now, and I could sell with small profit or so, but I sold when I saw that the fundamentals, they had started compute at edge in, if I remember well, mid 2019, and it was a very important element in my thesis, because edge computing will be extremely important in the future. But they kept postponing that general launch. And they only did that now, more than 2 years later. If you compare that with Cloudflare, it would have been 2 months. And that really makes a difference. That really makes a difference. If you look at Fastly, it's a CDN, and now they have compute at edge. Well, great. It will be a great product, I'm sure. And I'm not saying that Fastly cannot be a good investment, not at all. I mean, we don't have to, think binary here and yes or no. It's much more complicated, and there's a lot of gray between the black and white, right? So, but I'm not convinced about Fastly anymore, and it's too much usage based, and they don't normally, if a company is usage based, you make contracts in which you smooth that out, and it's not happening in a great way with a Fastly. So the new CRO, I quickly saw the numbers, and I saw that they added a record new number of customers this quarter, which is great for them. And I always hope that every shareholder makes money. So I'm happy for Fastly shareholders to see that they could really accelerate that, those partners, those customers. But I can see Fastly grow at, I don't know, 15-20% per year, and I think Cloudflare will go much, much, much faster.
Right on. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Thanks for asking that question, Dave. And I know this is the last question I had before we take some questions from the audience. I know you need to leave around 6:15, Chris, but we're hearing a lot about the Web3. That's certainly going to be a big part of the future, whether people want to admit it or not. How do you see Cloudflare kind of positioning themselves to kind of participate in that next leg of innovation on the internet? Because that's certainly coming like a lot faster than most think. And I think Cloudflare definitely has the mindset of always innovating and kind of trying to position itself in the best way possible. But I haven't heard too much about this. I think Prince tweeted something a couple weeks ago about it. So I'm just curious if you read into it or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, there was a blog post about Web 3.0, and the tweet that you referred to probably of Matthew Prince said something like, "I don't pretend that this what's his age, 55-year-old CEO really understands everything here. So if he doesn't understand everything, how should I?" I think Web 3.0 is still extremely early. There's a lot of hype, and especially with Facebook or metaverse. I think we're still very, very early, and I see a lot of hype actually right now, of which I hope that it goes away fast, not because I don't believe in Web 3.0. It will come, that's for sure. But, if you look at all the innovations that we have seen in history, there's always, the hype cycle, you probably know that. So there's a huge inflation of expectations and hopes, and then then the fall is there, like we've seen in .com bubble burst in 2000 2003, and only then slowly after that comes the slope of what is it called, slope of enlightenment or something like that. So more and more real functions can be built on that platform, and even people who know that hype cycle very well, and if you don't know it, just Google it, and you'll see the hype cycle. It was invented or conceived by Gartner, I think, and it has always been like that. I was a very early internet user, 1990. I think it was the end of 1994. It could have been early 1995. Definitely in 1995. So I knew the internet and very well, and I saw especially how limited it was. Um, you see the opportunities and you see what it could become, but it's not there yet. And it also often has to do with hardware, and we see the same thing right now. Hardware at the time was um, you had to dial in on a landline telephone line. Um, at the time for internet, which was very slow. If you wanted to have a picture, you could drink a coffee for 30 minutes or so, because it took that long before it was loaded or downloaded. And you'll see the same thing right now at a higher level, of course, because we're more advanced. But I mean, for me, this is the Web 3.0 is it's just it's just a baby. It's just born, and you cannot expect that baby already to play the best basketball game ever, right? It can be a very talented baby, and the parents are the best athletes ever, and but you still have to wait. And I mean, it's not a perfect comparison, because with a baby it's less sure. I'm pretty sure that Web 3.0 will be huge, but there's too much expectation right now about it being near. If you look at the internet, I'm talking about 1995. If you look at SaaS businesses, common software as a service, Salesforce, that was around 2009, 2010. You saw a whole wave of SaaS companies, and then cloud computing, etc. AWS was started in 2006, which was very early. And you'll see the same thing. You'll see the same thing with Web 3.0. Cloudflare is already preparing. They have written a blog post about it. It was interesting, but it's quite a while ago, so I don't remember that much. It was not that easy to understand for me as well. Although as I said, they always use language in which you do get everything or understand everything more or less. So it's good to read that, and it's good to see that they are preparing. But it's still so incredibly early. It's still so. I really think this is for the metaverse, for Web 3.0. It's 1995, and will it take 20 years, because that's more or less how long it took before Amazon was really huge, right? Um, and SaaS companies really became dominant, and there was a bigger and bigger switch, the hockey stick curve. That took 20 years. I don't think this will take 20 years, but probably take 10 to 15.
Awesome, man. I think we've covered a lot. Avi, I know you had a question, but I don't know if we want to take any Q&A, because this has gone for quite some time.
Yeah, I accidentally hit this. I didn't know. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I know we've gone pretty in depth here, talking about babies. That was incredible towards the end there. So yeah, if anyone does have questions, we can probably take one or two more. Otherwise, see, I just press it again. Apparently, what's going on here?
I think we have one from Investing Games, if you'd like to ask. But yeah, we're not going to be able to take too many, so if we get bombarded, we'll have to probably do something separately, and we'll definitely post a recording of this. So go ahead, Investing Games.
Hey guys, thank you so much for hosting this. You guys have amazing material, all of you. Chris, your material is incredible. You're gonna hate this question, because and personally I don't fully believe that valuations are everything. I understand the long-term concept, and that's the concept I believe in. But I do think that in the especially in the short term, I mean, it matters to some extent. With their valuation right now, I think last time I checked, it was like near 100 times last 12 months sales. one thing has to happen. It's either the valuation comes down or the company grows into it. Do you think realistically it can continue trading at this kind of like 100x last 12 months, as it grows? Or alternatively, based on the numbers, which you're way more familiar with than I am, what's the timeline here for growing into that kind of valuation, something reasonable, comparable to other companies within this kind of with this kind of sector?
Well, the first question to ask there, what is reasonable? Can you answer that?
Looking at some of the other competitors, I mean, obviously Fastly is not a great example right now, considering we're factoring in that they're not as great of a company. There's no question that Cloudflare is a phenomenal organization, and they're going to continue to grow. But 100 times last 12 months sales, it's hard to almost palate that and be able to get into a stock that either has to base for an incredibly long period of time to be able to catch up in the fundamentals, or compress at least somewhat, which makes it so much more difficult to kind of continue adding or getting in for some folks.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I have already said, I think, several times, I don't know if you were here from the start, but I have said several times, it's extremely expensive. It's, it's crazily overvalued, to use that term again. But how are you going to value it? How are you going to say, that this is what it's worth? Last 12 months, I never look at that. I always look forward, because for high growth companies, last 12 months says nothing. But even on a forward basis, it's extremely expensive. Of course, it's, I don't know, 65 or 70 times forward earnings, revenue. Sorry. So yeah, of course. But as I said, the market can be irrational for a very long time. When I wrote my article at 104, you saw it trading at, what was it? 60 times last 12 months as well. Again, there is no way for me, and that's why I asked the question, what is a reasonable valuation? You don't have any other company that you can compare with. So how are you going to say, oh, now it's reasonable, I'm going to buy? Again, would I go all in here? Of course not, never. I mean, I never go all in. I always dollar cost average into my position. So over months, and the fastest full position for me was C Limited in 3 months, and that was extremely fast for me. Normally it's 6 months to a year or longer. And if you don't have Cloudflare right now and you want it, nothing wrong with buying just one share and maybe 1% of what you see as a full position, or 3% or 5%, depending on the size of your portfolio. So it's also about portfolio management, right? So would I say, go all in and put all your chips on Cloudflare right now? Of course not. That would be stupid. In general, I think it's never a great idea to put all of your money in at once. Spread it out over time, and you'll have to worry much less about valuations, unless you average in too fast, of course. But that would be my answer. Again, it's extremely expensive. There are two ways of growing into that valuation, and that is higher revenue growth for a long time, or the stock or the multiple coming down. And normally what you see in those situations is a bit of both. So it's a completely different situation, but if we look at C Limited, for example, what you see is that each time before earnings, it goes up. The price to sales ratio, goes up to about 26, 27. Then you have the earnings, and it drops because of those great earnings. It drops to 20. Over the next quarter, it goes up to 26, 27 times sales. Good earnings again. It goes down to 20 because of those good earnings. So if you have growth, if you have hyper growth, that could go faster, and your You can have you can. I did the math with Shopify at a certain moment, and I assumed that its price to sales ratio would be cut in half, and it could still be a 10 bagger at that time, with revenue growth, or even with declining revenue growth. So it's always, I always look at such things from the long term, and you're completely right. It's absurdly expensive, but it has been very expensive for a long time now, and um, you cannot tell if this is going away right now or not. And as you say, if you have a shorter time horizon, it probably makes sense to trim a bit, or to not go into the stock. So that makes a difference, I think. So
Yeah.
it's always the perspective that you have.
Yeah, no, of course. It all depends on what's your risk kind of management technique, how long you want to be in a certain stock. And, I wouldn't blame anyone for taking some off the table here. I think that's totally fair, and that's to each their own.
Yeah, well, but you touch on a pet peeve of mine. I don't call that risk. I hate that risk term in that kind of way, because risk for me is that you permanently lose money over the long term, and all the rest is volatility. So volatility is not risk.
And they say volatility creates the best opportunity, right? So that's kind of the market for you. But no, awesome, Chris. It was great chatting with you, and thanks for talking net. And really appreciate this, and thank you everyone for joining in. Thanks a lot, Chris.
I enjoyed it as well. So thank you very much for doing these.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Y'all on level 1, I'm level 3. Pounding on the table for my team. Every night I flex, I'm making big moves.